So, thank you for having me. Today we're going to go through the power of less using minimalism and negative space in photography. Before we begin, I'd like you to take a moment to look at the photograph on the screen. At a first glance, it may appear very simple. There may be only one subject surrounded by a large area of empty space. Yet it's often these kinds of images that hold our attention the longest. As photographers, we're often encouraged to include more in our photographs. More color, more detail, more action, and more subjects. But some of the strongest images are created by doing exactly the opposite, removing everything that doesn't contribute to the story. Today, I'd like to explore two closely connected concepts, negative space and minimalism. We'll look at what they are, why they are so effective, and how photographers across different genres have used these principles to create images that are both simple and powerful. Along the way, I share examples from some of the masters of minimalist photography, as well as photographs from my own portfolio. And I hope that by the end of this presentation, you'll see that sometimes the most powerful photographs aren't about adding more to the frame. They're about knowing what to leave out. So let's begin. Why negative space is, what minimalism is, how they work together, why they are powerful across all genres of photography, practical ways to use them in our own work. Michael Kenna, I love his work. Michael Kenna is one of the world's best-known minimalist landscape photographers. His long exposures simplify the landscape into shape, tone, and atmosphere. His work demonstrates how empty space can be just as important as the subject. Hiroshi Sugimoto, I hope I pronounced this well. Another photographer who has had a profound influence on minimalist photography is Hiroshi Sugimoto. One of his most celebrated bodies of work is his theater series, where he photographed classic cinemas using extremely long exposures during the entire screen of a film. Every frame projected onto the screen accumulated into a single exposure, leaving the screen as a brilliant white rectangle surrounded by the dark architecture of the theater. These photographs are remarkable examples of simplicity and balance. By reducing countless moving images into one luminous shape, Sugimoto transformed busy, dynamic scenes into calm, minimalist compositions. His work reminds us that photography isn't always about capturing every detail. Sometimes it's about stripping a scene back to its essential elements and allowing simplicity to create the strongest visual impact. Fan Ho, one of my favorite photographers. When we think about minimalism in street photography, one name that immediately comes to mind is Fan Ho. Working on the streets of Hong Kong, he masters the use of light, shadow, and geometry. Rather than photographing crowded scenes, he waited patiently for a single person to enter the perfect pool of light or the ideal position within the frame. His work shows us that timing is just as important as composition. A busy street can become a minimalist photograph if we wait for the right moment, and I agree 100%. So Leiter, another one of my favorites. Another photographer whose work demonstrates that less can truly be more is So Leiter. Unlike many photographers of his time, Leiter embraced color and often used reflections, fogged windows, and out-of-focus foregrounds to simplify a scene, rather than reveal every detail. He understood that photography doesn't have to explain everything. By allowing parts of the image to remain hidden, he created photographs that feel poetic, intimate, and open to interpretation. His work teaches us that simplicity can also be achieved through color, atmosphere, and suggestion. Although these photographers worked in different countries, different genres, and different periods, they all shared one important idea. They understood that every element in a photograph should have a purpose. That's exactly what we're going to explore today as we look at negative space and minimalism and how these principles can strengthen our own photography. I divided these into parts. So part one is understanding negative space. What is negative space? Negative space is the empty area surrounding the main subject. It is not wasted space, it is part of the composition, and it helps the viewer focus on the subject and creates visual breathing room. Some of my images, when I used to take seascapes, a simple branch on a seashore makes a nice minimalistic and fine art photo. Rock, ICM with a single seagull, a single boat on the shore and not in the sea, a person walking up the stairs near the parliament in Valletta. Why negative space matters? Negative space can simplify an image, direct attention, create balance, add emotion, and strengthen storytelling. Like I'm showing an example here. This kid, when he is in as a close-up, it's still minimalistic. But on the right, when showing more, for me, this is a much better photo as a minimalist, as you showing more. Another photo shot in Venice. The one of the kid was in Tate Modern in London. Another one in Tate Modern London. I love this place to shoot a lot, although it takes me a while to go there. Another one I shot in Edinburgh last year, in Valencia, 2 or 3 years ago. The emotional impact, space affects how we feel. Large empty areas can communicate peace, solitude, freedom, isolation, and mystery. Parliament in Malta as well in Valletta. The same Parliament in Valletta. Valencia again. Slima, Malta. Part 2, minimalism in photography. What is minimalism? Minimalism is the idea that less can often communicate more. A minimalist image usually contains one clear subject, clean composition, limited distractions, and strong visual impact. I took this in Valencia. I'm really happy, and it's the cover of my book as well. Valletta, the prison of Malta, but this is not a prisoner, but a guard who was passing by, and I grabbed the shot. Valencia at night. The three pillars of minimalism are negative space, subject isolation, and removal of distractions. I caught this in Valletta, Tate Modern again. Valletta, I isolated this guy who was praying outside the church by going on slow shutter speed and making the people blurry, so I lost the confusion of this busy Valletta road. Simplicity is hard. Minimalism isn't photographing less, it's seeing more clearly. And every element in the frame must earn its place. Tate Modern again. Valencia. Edinburgh. Part 3, composition techniques. Subject isolation. The viewer should immediately know where to look. Ways to isolate subjects are distance, light, color, focus, and framing. London, under the Blackfriars Bridge. Rule of thirds, negative space works beautifully with off-center composition. London again. Venice, Italy. Symmetry and center composition. Minimalist photography often uses symmetry. Taken in Fort St. Angelo, Malta. I took this in a symmetrical way. It's a pity the guy isn't exactly in the middle, but the best I could do. Lines and geometry, simple shapes create strong photographs. This was what my eye. This is Matera in Italy. Vatican in Rome. Valletta. Part 4 is about light and shadow. Light as a simplifier. Light can remove clutter and isolate the subject. I took this photo. I waited for this woman to enter the beam of light. Shadows as negative space. Shadows are often overlooked. They simplify scenes and create mystery. The one on the left, it's about a kid coming towards me in Valletta, and the one on the right is in Gozo, the Cittadella, of a woman crossing this very narrow street, if you can call it street. Part 5, applying the concepts across genres. Street photography, using walls, lights, and clean backgrounds to simplify busy scenes. This is one of my forte. Valletta. Valletta. These are both near the parliament. Landscape photography, open skies and water naturally create negative space. Another branch on the seashore, taking this in long exposure. Portrait photography, simple backgrounds direct attention to expression. A shot of this beautiful lady, which I took for my associate qualification. Architecture, geometry, and clean lines naturally support minimalism. This is in the, if I'm not mistaken, the Vatican as well in Rome. Fine art photography, space can become symbolic. One of my famous double exposures. The guy is the center of the attention through a double exposure of a guy walking in Valletta, and the other one is in the Tate Modern. Part 6, practical tips. 5 practical tips. 1, simplify the frame. 2, move your feet, which many unfortunately don't do. 3, look for clean backgrounds. 4, use light creatively. And 5, be patient. You really need to be patient for these kind of shoots. Their door in Dorset, England. Valletta, Malta again. Valletta near the Parliament again. Valletta, Victoria Gate. Learning to see differently. Start looking for empty walls, open skies, reflections, shadows, single subjects, clean backgrounds, and the photograph often exists before the subject arrives. I tend to, in my street photography, find the scene, work the composition, and then wait for the subject to pass. He will be my actor in my scene. Valletta near the parliament. This was a really cute guy. He was really shy of me taking his photo against the sky. Another one against the sky. Reflection. Reflection. This is a funny photo where I was waiting for somebody to pass. And this guy looked exactly where I wanted him, and he made the cherry on the cake. Another Valletta. Final thoughts. Negative space and minimalism remind us that photography is not only about what we include, it's also about what we leave out. The empty space around the subject can be just as important as the subject itself. When used intentionally, simplicity creates stronger compositions, clearer stories, and more emotional impact. One of my favorite photos. Thank you. Sometimes the most powerful part of a photograph is the space we choose to leave empty. That's it.